Well, it's the end of 2019. We're getting close to the new year in just a couple of days. And I know a lot of people go through and they do a retrospective of their best photos, their best videos. I tend to go back and look at the things that maybe were challenging or difficult for me that I wish I would have done differently, just to remind myself, hey, you know what? Don't do that again. And photography is no different. So what I've done is I went back, looked at my photos through 2019 and specifically looked for the photos that were challenging for me or that didn't turn out quite the way that I wanted them to. And I thought I'd share that process with you of at least 5 photos and why I thought that they weren't good photos and what I could have done differently. Let's get started. Photo number one. Photo number one is a photo I took at Natural Bridges State Park near Santa Cruz. It was an early sunrise, and I'll show you the photo now. The photo itself was really the focal point, the focus of the story was the gentleman that was on the beach. He was exercising with what appeared to be a weighted pole. I found it very, very interesting, and I wanted to take a photo. My initial idea was that the foreground would have the rocks, the waves washing over the rocks, and then the gentleman and towards the background doing his exercises. Unfortunately, there was a couple of things that I could have done differently. I could have used a polarizer, which would have popped the colors out more, especially with that harsh light that was coming from the sunrise. I definitely could have changed the angle and reduced the amount of foreground and focused more and centered more on the subject, which was the gentleman that was out on the beach working out. And definitely could have done a couple different exposures, including a longer exposure to get some of that milky smooth water that was over the rocks. And I could have done a faster exposure because I could have stopped the motion of the gentleman when he was exercising. What happened was I actually tried to get it all in one shot and failed miserably. So the things I learned from this photo is use a polarizer, really think about the composition and the angle of the camera and what it's going to grab. The point of interest or the focus of the story of the photo needs to be prominent in the photo and needs to be the key point of what you're taking a photo of. And finally, what I learned, if you really take a look at the photo, there's the glare that's across the lens. A lens hood in bright sunlight would have saved that photo from having those glare spots racing across the front of the photo. So some things I learned from that one. This was early, January, February of 2019. So it was way at the beginning. I definitely had an idea in my head of what I wanted to see. I just didn't take the time to really build it. I was more focused on some of the landscapes in the area. Photo number 2 is a photo I took near Santa Cruz. There's a pier out by Capitola where it kind of juts out when you're standing on the beach. For the life of me, I can't even remember why I took that photo. I look at it and I think, well, what was my subject? What was I thinking? And I just don't even know. I don't know why I took it. I'm sure it's at one point when I was out there, I saw something that I liked, something that caught my eye, and I snapped a photo. Looking back on it now, I really realize that what you need to do is you really need to know what you're taking a photo of. There has to be something that's really interesting. Definitely want to have a point of focus for the story that you're trying to tell with the photo. This lacks all of those things. There's very little dimension, no foreground, Foreground is really, really important when you're doing landscape photography. There was just no foreground. There's nothing to have any kind of draw any kind of interest or draw your eye to any point in the photo. And if you notice, I tried to angle the camera so that I could cut away from the brown water because the ocean looked really, really brown that morning. And unfortunately, there was no way for me to cut it out completely. And it looks bad. It's just brown. It doesn't look good. And then the final thing that I realized was the clouds that were in the shot, those clouds were actually moving fairly rapidly. Had I taken a longer exposure, used the ND filter and taken a longer exposure, I would have had some nice movement in those clouds, made them look softer, and could have possibly created some more interest in the photo. Unfortunately, I did all of those things wrong, and I can't even remember why I took the photo. Now the next photo is shot in that same area, but instead of facing away from the sun, it was shooting towards the sun. So I actually took this one first, and then the one of the pier second. Now in this photo, the sun hadn't quite risen yet, and I actually have a series of photos with some people in the foreground, the sun coming up behind them. That area was kind of difficult because at that time the tide was out, so the water looked kind of junky. There was a lot of debris in the water, and it was hard to get a shot where that was left out. I tried taking it out with Photoshop. There's just so much stuff. It's really, really tough to do. But in this shot, the water really doesn't look like it has a lot of debris in it. The problem with this shot is that the foreground's just not that interesting. The sky looks colorful, it has leading lines through the ocean, it's a little on the dark side, and I've tried lightening it, but when you lighten it too much, you kind of lose interest in the photo. It's not as dramatic. So I edited it the best that I could to still maintain interest, maintain the color in the sky, but definitely it was the focus on what's in the foreground. Had I moved over maybe a step or two in one direction or changed the angle of the photo, it would probably have been a better photo, and I think it would have been a great moment to capture. But it was, again, one of those times where I was rushing, and because I was rushing and thinking about another photo that I would be taking right after that in another location and that I had needed to get there, I really didn't do that one small scene justice. So I guess the takeaway from that would be if you're gonna sit your camera up and get the tripod out and change all the settings and really focus in the moment and getting that shot. If it's just gonna be a snapshot and it's not gonna be something that you're really gonna invest in, hey, that's what cell phones are for, that's what GoPros are for. They take great photos, and they don't necessarily have to be the bangers that you would put in a calendar, but hey, more than likely they're going to be Instagram worthy. So photo number 4, this was actually taken at Lake Kauai. It's about an hour drive from where I live. It's here in California. I was actually headed up to Sequoia National Park, and it was during a government shutdown. And when I got to the park was closed, and I couldn't go up and actually enter the park. On this day, it was one of the first videos that I've ever shot and posted to YouTube. And in fact, I'll link it here. It's going to be, I believe it's called The Government Spoiled My Plans, something like that. Anyway, check it out. It's really interesting to see what my videos were like then and where they're at now, and how I've changed the way that I do things in my video. But anyway, so this photo was taken while I was out hiking around and looking at the Lake Kauai area. What I realized in this photo was that what I should have done is I should have used an ND filter and slowed the water down. When you look at the water, you can you see too much motion. If I had slowed the shutter or lowered the shutter speed, I could have got a nice milky smooth water and texture on there, which would have added more interest into the photo. The colors were very, very drab. I did the best to increase the colors without really driving the saturation too much. This was another case where a polarizer would have been handy, as well as using an ND filter. And then ultimately, again, it's the idea of the angle of the camera. What I should have done is I should have taken multiple shots at different angles, but within that same composition. I think the scene as seen through the eye was attractive. The scene as seen through the camera lost some of the depth and the complexity that I was hoping to capture. But had I taken the time to really compose the shot, I probably would have walked away with a better photo. That was, in fact, my very first time out hiking and shooting video and doing photography at the same time. And my focus that day was more on the video, not on photography. I was so focused on getting good B-roll that I kind of lost sight of the photography. Also, at that time, I only had one camera. So my DSLR was my video camera, and it was my stills camera. Whereas now I have a GoPro Hero 7 that I take with me, and that's usually my B-roll camera. So that way I'm not sacrificing time with my stills camera. It's easier for me to balance. I know a couple of YouTubers are carrying two cameras. I prefer the action camera because it's more durable and it's lightweight, easy to carry. And I can carry spare batteries, and they can be charged via a backup battery system and a USB-C cable. But now that I've got that system, it's a little bit easier. I can compose photos and record video without having to switch back and forth off of one camera. But in this instance, it was my first experience trying to do both, and became very, very awkward at one point. And because I was so focused on video, I rushed the photo. So this last photo that I actually took on a trip to Disneyland, and we were in the City Walk area. But there was a couple of spots where I wanted to try some silhouette photography. And this one Sephora store was super bright inside the store, but the framing was very, very dark, and I loved the way it looked. And what I saw in my mind was a photo of a pedestrian walking by the store, but with one of the Mickey Mouse balloons behind them, and capturing that. Now, what I was specifically looking for was a red balloon. So I positioned myself in front of the Sephora, and I waited and I waited and I waited. And then finally, someone with the Mickey Mouse balloon came walking by, and I grabbed the snapshot. Now, I was in a hurry, and that seems to be a trend, to slow down. And I didn't review the shot until later. And when I reviewed the shot, what I realized was the image in my mind did not match the image that I captured. What had happened was their balloon turned sideways. So you can't really see that it's a Mickey Mouse balloon. There's no mouse shape within the balloon. It was the right color. It was red. It was the color that I wanted. And there were some other things with this photo as well. I was using a longer lens, which didn't have a lower aperture on it, which meant I couldn't really capture a fast photo. It was actually pretty slow, which meant that the silhouette had blur, and I really wanted the silhouette to be frozen in time, with the balloon frozen in time. So that was the first thing, was I should have changed lenses and put on a lens that had a lower aperture. The second thing that I noticed in this photo was I should have changed the angle of the shot. If you look at the top, there's some fans you can see above the Sephora sign. I think they're fans. Had I lowered the camera at a different angle, I could have blocked those fans, and they're kind of distracting in the photo, and I wasn't happy with seeing those. Also, had I backed away from the store more and cropped in, I could have gotten more of the pedestrian's silhouette instead of just the torso. And that kind of bothered me because in my mind I could see the legs, I could see the arms, and then of course the red balloon trailing after them. I did get the red balloon, but not the quality of shot that I was hoping for. It was super close. And finally, the thing that I would recommend, and I was just up shooting photos at the up in Wolverton in Sequoia National Park, and I would recommend making sure that you're set up so that you can take multiple shots, one right after another, to capture that motion, especially if you're interested in taking a shot similar to what I took, but of course better because you'll know these things now, is taking multiple shots. So you can stop the motion and it gives you multiple shots to choose from. I don't remember. At one point, the balloon could have been in the proper position. Had I taken a few shots, I may have even caught it rotating so that you could tell that it was a Mickey Mouse balloon. But it was a good effort, and I learned from it, and I learned some lessons from it. But that photo is just another example of not really thinking through how do I make this happen and using my best abilities. It was a I really want this and rushing through to get it rather than planning it out. That's it. Those are my 5 photos, my 5 bad photos that I really learned a lot from in 2019. Now, that doesn't mean that they're the only bad photos that I took by any means. I took others, but these are the ones that really highlighted to me the things that I really needed to focus, I'll really need to focus on in 2020. So let me know in the comments below what you think of the photos that I pointed out. What did you think about my takeaways from those photos? And if you have any other takeaways, please share them below. If you're not subscribed to the channel, please subscribe, like the video, and help this channel out by growing. You can share, whatever you would like to do. I'm always happy to have more people climb on board. Listen, this will probably be my last video for 2019. Some changes and some updates coming up for 2020. I'll be announcing those the first week of January, so that's coming really, really soon, so stay tuned for that. Again, I appreciate all you followers. I appreciate everything that you do to support the channel. I would like to wish you a happy new year, and we'll see you in 2020.